We're going to make moxa cookies. Actually, maybe in Chinese the word is cakes, but it's like a flat cake. We're going to make ones though that are dry so that they can be made, a lot of them in advance, and then when you want to do indirect moxa, you have them ready. So the recipe I will put in the description of the video. So, if you want to see exactly what herbs I'm using, that will be written there. But I'm just going to show you the process here. So these are some moxa cookies that I made a while ago. There. And so, I don't know, can you see? Yeah. There. They have some holes in them. I'll talk about that when we talk about how they're used. So they can be stored for a long time, although I found that bugs like them. So I don't store them in plastic anymore. If you store them in glass, the bugs can't get in, but if you store them in plastic, sometimes the bugs can eat through, and then they're kind of ruined if you don't use them within a few months. So I already ground the powder. These are, I don't know, 10 herbs maybe. Like I said, the recipe will be online. And they're ground and sifted. You can use a coarser powder, but I've made it both ways and I like the fine powder better. So these are ground and sifted. And then we need to mix in some white flour, because the cakes won't hold together unless we make a dough and knead it, and then like bread it will hold together, whereas if you just made it without the flour it would just crumble and wouldn't be safe, because if it crumbles when you're burning stuff on it, then it can injure the patient. So I'm just going to put the flour in, and I'll mix the two, the herbs and the flour. It'll get mixed plenty, so I don't have to mix perfectly now. But let's get it basically mixed. And then the recipe calls for ginger juice. I had some in the freezer from when I had made some before. The way I make it is I put lumps of ginger in the blender with a small amount of water, and then I liquefy it, and after that strain it. And so it's not like 100% ginger juice, it's slightly diluted, but it's still very strong. The recipe also calls for some honey, but I don't have any honey I want to use right now, so I don't know how important the honey is. I don't think it's that important, so I'm not gonna use the honey. So, I'm gonna just like start making a dough, and if I still need more liquid after I've used up all the ginger juice I have, then I have more water over there that I could use. So that's what I'm going to do for now, is make dough just like you'd make bread dough. So I'm going to take some of the dough, a portion of the dough, and roll it out to make the moxa cookies. I'm going to keep the part I'm not using under the bowl so that it doesn't dry out. Okay, and so how's that for thickness? Maybe I can roll it a little bit more. Okay, so now I've got a little flat thing, and I can use various sized cookie cutters depending on how big are the moxa cones going to be. Then if I want to make really big moxa cones, I can use a big cookie cutter, because you want the cone to be inside the edge of the moxa cake, moxa cookie. And you don't want them too thick or none of the heat will penetrate, but you don't want them too thin or it'll get too hot too quick. This little space, there's not enough room, so I'm going to use a smaller one for smaller cones. And then, of course, this dough can be reworked and reused. So I'll put it back under to keep it moist. There's one more step, which is that you need to make holes. This is a toothpick. Don't need anything fancy, but you probably want to support the moxa cookie. If you just try to poke holes in it, you might break it. So I'm making here, I guess I'll make 5 holes because this one's pretty big. And then I'm putting it in the food dehydrator there. You can see the holes. The original recipe says to cook it in the oven on a very low heat, but I'm going to use my dehydrator instead. So I'm just going to continue doing this. I'll show you when we get to the next stage. Well, here they are. I had 2 dehydrator trays, maybe not quite full, but almost 2 full trays. So I'm going to dehydrate them, I don't know, maybe for 2 hours and see how they are then, and then I can start using them. Let me point out a few things. One is, depending on what herbs you use, you don't want anyone accidentally thinking these are actually cookies. Maybe it's not good to call them that, but label the jar carefully. Here, I mean, it's an ugly label. You probably can't see, but I say, do not taste these. Do not eat these, because this one actually has some Chuānwū in it, and that's not something that you want anyone eating. Don't forget to poke holes in them. And I think that's it. These are the moxa cookies I made yesterday. I ended up putting them in the dehydrator for a total of 3 hours. I did 2, and I thought it could use some more. So I still think that they might dry out a little bit more, so I'm not going to put them in a jar yet, in case there's any moisture. You don't want them to get moldy, but they're pretty much ready to go. They smell good. The moxa cookies are done, so I'm going to keep them in a jar so the bugs don't get to them. Keep the jar tightly sealed after I'm 100% sure that they're dry. I have a few final things to say. Both of these look fine, but if you look at the back, can you see? This one, it's hard to see, but it's like cracked underneath, although the top, well, there's a little crack there, but the bottom has much more of a crack there. Maybe you can see that crack, and I can tell that it goes pretty much all the way through, whereas this one, no cracks. So this one is better. This one, actually, when they're big cracks, the heat of the Moxa cone can go through much more quickly. And then the patient says hot way before anything's happened. You know, you want it to be a mellow heat that, you know, penetrates slowly. And when it's pretty cracked like this one, it's not going to work. So when you make these, you want to check before you use them if it's overly cracked or not. Most indirect moxa uses moist substances like ginger or garlic, or in another video I show making little medicinal herbal cakes out of powder, ground up, you know, herbs and some liquid, and those are all moist. But this is a dry heat, so if somebody has dampness, perhaps this is better. If somebody has dryness, though, this will make it probably even more drying. Over here, as far as the cracks go, this one, can we see? The light is so bad. There's a crack at the top of this one. But when you look at the back, it doesn't go through. And when you kind of look from the sides, you can tell the crack is pretty superficial. So, you know, you just have to inspect them and decide if they're usable or not. This one doesn't really have a crack. So this one looks good. This one doesn't look good, but it's still usable. Okay. And then the cone size should approximately, you know, work with the cookie. You don't want it to be out to the edge, because then if they say hot, you can't pick it up. And that just gives a little buffer zone in case any ash tumbles. So different size cones for different ones. You do want to be able to pick it up if the patient says hot. Of course, you could use tweezers. But sometimes if you don't have them ready, it's better if you just have a little space so your fingers can grab it. So then don't forget to make holes in them. You do want holes, but you don't want cracks. Can you see the holes? Yeah, you can see the holes. Okay, but you don't want cracks. So basically, it's the same as any other kind of, you know, indirect moxa. You put the cookie on the site. You put the cone on top. You want to kind of press it to have good contact if you can. And then you can light it with a lighter, but I think it's more elegant to light it with an incense stick. And then you just let it burn down. You can put a second cone if you want a second cone. It looks like the smoke has stopped, so you might think it's done, but if you put your hands over, I can still feel so much heat radiating off. So there's no reason to remove it now. It's still glowing inside, even if you can't see the ember, even if you can't see the smoke. And so you don't need to remove it until the sensation of heat is gone. You can put a second cone on top, but if I put the cone on now when the heat is still radiating out, the cone on top will ignite and burn from the bottom, and that makes it unstable and more likely to fall off and have an accident. So I wait until I don't feel the heat radiating out, but still the moxa cookie or the moist substance, if you're using ginger or whatever, keeps the warmth for a little while. So you have a little bit of time after it's gone out, and then you can just put the second cone on top, squishing the ash of the first cone. If there's a lot of ash buildup, you can scrape off the ash and then put the second cone on and replace it. And then you can just keep it going as many cones as you want. I am feeling the heat more now than when the smoke was happening because it's like really down at the bottom. And now I don't feel anything radiating off, but I still feel the heat penetrating. So I'm not going to remove this until I don't feel the heat penetrating anymore. So that's Moxa cookies. Yeah, don't eat them.